when did you get your first break in terms of like, getting into graphic design and working with artists and stuff like that?
So that whole story started off, like I said, it was working for an advertising agency in New York City. And basically, when you're a beginning graphic designer, you go into what they call layout production. So even though you have a beautiful degree from a top grade school and you did great grades and what have you, you're going to start at the very bottom. So I started at the very bottom at this advertising agency, literally in their layout department, laying out ads for cars and what have you, and shopping malls and that. While I was doing that, I also had a side business where I did illustrations of houses for the newspaper when people would put their houses up for sale, or real estate agencies. So I did all those illustrations that were in the Star Ledger and what have you, or a great deal of them. My brother, on the other hand, was up at Cornell getting his master's degree in business. And he had also sort of set something up with James Smith in Rap-A-Lot. So my brother went to school with Cliff Blodgett, and Cliff Blodgett knew James Smith. Cliff Blodgett calls my brother and says, there's this thing called rap out there. It's the new music, and there could be a huge business opportunity if it's done right. So my brother was like, never heard of it in my life, but let's give it a shot. He went down, met with Jay, hooked up a deal, signed some contracts. My brother went back, finished off his master's degree. While he was doing his master's degree, now mind you, this is like 1990. My brother had a laptop computer. Think about that. And he was on a dial-up modem doing business with Texas from New York, which was unheard of, right? I mean, it just didn't happen back then. Once he graduated, he moved back down to Houston, and they ramped up the Ghetto Boys. They had Royal Flush, they had Choice, they had Prince Johnny C. They had all these guys, and obviously Scarface, and they started hitting the hits, and they started growing. And I mean, they grew explosively. And so my brother knew I was in graphic design. He knew that stuff. They were doing some album covers that were not turning out the way they wanted to. They were using outside entities to do the covers, so they're really, really expensive. And they had all this other advertising and ads that they need laid out in-house. Rap-A-Lot at that time was growing into this like juggernaut, right? So he's like, well, why don't you want to come down and give this a shot? We need some storyboards done for videos. We need some covers done. I was like, I got nothing to lose, man. I'm not married. I have no connections. I'm like, nothing to lose. Got my little Fiero, drove down there, boom, and started doing it. And that's when it all began. My first introduction to rap music. I was like, are they cussing? Did he say what I thought he said? Like, yeah, it's new. I was like, okay.
Wow, wow. That's a major introduction, for the first time to hear hip hop and hear the Ghetto Boys because they were so street and so uncut and raw. You
They
missed
were
the
hard.
whole 70s and the early
Yep.
80s, but it turned out to be a blessing because I think Scarface, he just performed at the Grammys, the
That's
last
right.
Grammys. So
Yep. Brad is he's a character, man, but that guy has longevity. You know what I mean? Mr.
exactly.
Jordan, he's got this thing. He just carries himself a certain way, and he's got a great sense of humor, but he's been a professional since I've known him all the way through. And he's been able to ride that wave and just keep it going. Smart guy. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. One of the greatest in terms of hip hop. Now after working with Rap-A-Lot, now did you do some stuff for Suave House or did you go to a different?
Yeah, so we were my brother and I both were working at Rap-A-Lot. Things were blowing up, and I basically said to my brother, I was like, hey, we're in need of like upgrading things instead of doing everything by hand and then sending it out to get done at an outside entity. How about we bring in a computer, and we're going to start this thing called computer graphics with this new program called Photoshop. And my brother was like, well, okay. So he talked to Jay, and the capital investment on that, this is back in 1991. The capital investment to set up one computer, one printer, and one scanner, $17,000. Yeah. And that's a big chunk of change. So there was a whole learning curve, of course, associated with any of that. So we sat down and we started going through it. We had a couple of the design entities there, a couple of the design people that knew a little bit more about it than I did, which was not a lot. And we just started working through all of these covers and making mistakes and writing down what mistakes were made. And eventually we got it down where we could actually design and lay out covers with special effects at Rap-A-Lot. That just elevated the covers and the image of everything that Rap-A-Lot was doing. And we started to see the fruits of that from the promo and from other acts coming to Rap-A-Lot saying, yeah, man, I want to join you because, you know, you've got some cool looking stuff. You've got great distribution. I want to be part of that Rap-A-Lot team. So that gave Jay a chance to sit there and say, hey, I've got this genre of artists that want to come here. And one thing led to the other. And then people started coming in and they're like, well, we just want to get the artwork done. So my brother and I sat down with Jay and we're like, listen, we have a demand that there could be two businesses here. There could be the art business, there could be the music business, and then there could be maybe the third business where we take care of everything. And we could not come up with an agreement, financial agreement with Jay to do the art as a separate entity and pay into that. So my brother at that kind of looked at it and said, what is the demand? The demand is very high. Maybe it's time to set up our own business. And that's where the beginning of Pen and Pixel started.
Wow, I definitely appreciate you sharing that major hip hop history.
Yeah, man.
That's phenomenal. Okay, now, so I guess like you will work with each individual record label, or just if an artist wanted your work, because you said the setup was $17,000, so you got to have a budget. Do they pay up front, or you get paid off of every CD? So if you can
Right.
talk about
No, I know people are like, oh, you must have got paid royalties off every single CD. And the way our business plan, my brother and I put a business plan together, we kind of looked at that whole thing and said that the headache of trying to track down which ones sold and which ones didn't, it just didn't make sense. So we did a per piece basis. So when we set the company up, my brother financed another $17,000 basically to get us started, right? So we bought the identical system that Rap-A-Lot had. Makes sense. I mean, we know the system. Why go through another learning curve? So we started off in our apartment, off our dining room table with this system. And my brother has a computer background. He's not a designer, but he's very, very smart with computers. He knows how they work. He knows what the mistakes are. He knows how to configure them. And he's very smart at business setup and systems. He's a systems guy. So we sat there and we started working through this computer for the first 3 weeks of Pen and Pixel's existence. We were not doing artwork for anybody. We were learning the computer, and we would learn the computer, write down what we did right, write down what we did wrong. And then he would get on the computer and do the same thing. And eventually, at the end of 3 weeks, we had a book on how to do graphic design with Photoshop One and Quark Express without making mistakes. And it was a handwritten book. And that's what we followed to be able to develop a training program to bring more people in to do the artwork. But the initial artwork, people think that Pen and Pixel was all the special effects artwork in the beginning. It was not. We actually designed little tiny cassette and little tiny CD covers for like Christian bands, Tejano, Mexican stuff. I mean, polkas. I mean, we did business with like Selecto Hits and Houston Records, where we would just pack all of these little basic CDs onto one sheet, send them out to get printed, come back, charge them for that. And that's the majority of how our finances happened at the very beginning, until Tony Draper came into the picture. And that's when things changed. Like the heavens opened.